Thank you so much for asking me to be here. I'm very honored. And before I start, I'd like to say a prayer, and then we'll go from there. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for the food that we shared and the fellowship. And I ask that you bless those that are listening so that it may give them hope in their personal journey, that whatever will be happening, that they will be seeking in their lives and in your will, they will know your faithfulness and your steadfast love. I ask this in Yeshua Jesus' name, amen. Amen. So this is actually a story more about God's faithfulness, and not just the faithfulness of a family's story. So with that, I'm going to get started. My story is going to start in approximately the 1930s when 16-year-old Bud Nisley, my biological father, and his brother Jim robbed a bank in Detroit, Michigan. The two boys had been brought up in a life of privilege, and then it was all shattered by the Great Depression. They believed by robbing the bank it would help them ease their woes. And of course, that's not the way that it all happened. Upon their capture, they were both sent to the Hershey's boys' home in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And they wouldn't stay there very long. They decided that wasn't their thing to do, so they escaped. And with that being said, Bud became a machinist. And he worked in different states, here, there, whatever. And thank goodness his mother had the fortitude to say, hey, the money's all gone. You guys have got to get a trade. So that's what took him to become a machinist. So he was all over the states. Well, within a certain amount of time, he then went to Colorado, and he met Teresa Valdez. That's her, that's my mother. And she was divorcee with 4 children from a previous marriage. But Bud was smitten. So it wasn't long before they had me. I came along, and then, can you believe this? 16 months later, she has triplets. Wow. There's the newspaper article, and with that, that's not very, back then, was very few that you'd have triplets, so there was a huge celebration, and they put it in the paper. Well, Bud saw that, and he was petrified, because it put back there, it put his name, his address, and his place of employment. So with that, he said we've got to leave, we've got to leave. So can you imagine the cousins all, and she came from a family of 13 children. So the uncles and aunts all got together to say goodbye, so they traveled in a car with 8 children to Holcomb, Washington. And he went up there because his half-brother had a machinist shop. So he's like, okay, I can start anew and we'll be okay. So with the FBI on his tail, because he had ran away from the boys' home, there went everything he had negotiated so that he would stay out of prison. So he was definitely hiding from the FBI. With that, he had left for a job, and so he was out of town. And Teresa was suffering. She had 5 children under the age of 5. So yeah, so she was suffering from postpartum depression, which they really didn't know too much about. So the story is she went to a drugstore to get milk or something, and she had a break. Now, lo and behold, the kids were all alone and no adults. And because she had the break, nobody knew that there were children. So for several weeks, that is the oldest, that's Orlando, and there are the triplets. They were born Angela, Betty, and Carol, and he was left on his own to try and take care of all of us. And there he was, washing out the diapers with a hose, and then going and asking the milkman if they could give them credit for milk, just to try and keep the family together. Well, a neighbor noticed, where's the adult? So they called the authorities. So the authorities came out and they found all of us with nobody there. And of course, Orlando didn't know what happened either. The last, we're all waiting. So they took us to a holding cell first, the police, and then made the phone call for the social services to collect all of us. So we were all moved to a foster home. And with that being said, when Bud came back, there was no children, there was no Teresa, there was nobody. So he actually had thought, the FBI found me, they've taken him, so he took off. So with that, the triplets were placed in another foster home, and there were 5 of us, with Orlando and with Jerry. And I'll let you know, Orlando was born in 46, Jerry was born in 48, Michael was born in 1950, Patsy was born in 1954, I'm born in 57, and the triplets were born in 59. So they stayed back in Washington State, and the rest of us were sent to Colorado and New Mexico. And we were, the older ones were basically, the 4 older ones, which was Orlando, Jerry, Michael, and Patsy, were farmed out to uncles and aunts on the Garduno family. And then the Knisely family, which was myself and the triplets, they didn't know what to do. The Gardunos said, well, she's not a Garduno. So they just placed me in a foster home, basically. And then the triplets were, they were adopted together. They were kept together, which was really a miracle back then. And they were adopted to a lawyer who had heard from the judge, hey, we've got these triplets, and the mother can't take care of them and whatever. So they were adopted to him. So we basically, we didn't really know. I was adopted with no family history whatsoever. I was adopted 1 week before my 5th birthday, and I'll tell you why, because Teresa always would either call or she would write. And back in those days, if the mother did any of those, then I couldn't be placed for adoption. And at one point, she was writing in a letter that she was going to get Michael and my older half-brother and myself together, but then she couldn't do it. She had another break. So what happened is that I did not know any of this history. I just thought that I was adopted and that's all that there was. And I was adopted into a pre-existing family already. They had 3 of their own children, and they then went ahead and adopted me. And so, as life goes on, I was, grew up and went off and had my own kids and whatever. So, 10 years ago, a knock at the door of one of the triplets came about. And with that, it was the granddaughter to the foster mom who was there at the beginning of everything. And the granddaughter said, I have found this box of letters and pictures, and I'm wondering if you would be interested in looking at these. So of course, their names had changed by then. They were no longer Angela, Betty, and Carol. They were actually Susan Walters, Debbie Custer, and Jana Koch. So she said, well, we'll come in. But here's the wild part about the situation. She kept having a dream about that there would be a knock at her door, and somehow they would know something. Now, they knew a little bit more than I did, as far as they knew they had an older half-brother. That's really all they knew. And the half-brother was trying to keep things together. But the back part of it is Orlando had been, that's Orlando. That was his graduation picture. And he had gotten married, but let me tell you something. He kept looking for us, all of us. He would go up to Washington State. He would go to Holcomb. He would ask, where are the triplets? Well, of course, they did not have any records that were open back then. So he would go to Colorado, and he would look for me. Well, where is she? Nothing. All through that man's life, he was searching for us, searching. So the interesting thing about the box of letters is there in the letters was Teresa writing to the foster mom and saying, how are the triplets? How are they? What's going on? Do you know what happened to Elizabeth? Ask the triplets, because she was still not okay. Maybe they know where she is. So through all of this time, they just kept looking and looking. Once that box of letters, Debbie, Susan, and Jana started reading, and they called up their adopted mom, was still alive, and asked her to come over to the house, and sat down and was reading the letters. And within those letters, they were able to get some names. And one of the names was from her sister, which was in California. So the triplets reached out to her, and of course, oh my gosh, your brother is going to be so excited, so excited. So that is their reunion 10 years ago. That is Orlando, and that is Susan is in the black, Jana is in the green, and that's Debbie in the red, and that's Patsy, and they all met. Now, where am I? I am no place to be found. They had a huge article in the Seattle Times, and they said, they told the story and everything. Well, I didn't know anybody in Seattle Times. It wasn't on the internet, anything, so I still didn't know. Orlando passed away 5 months after this reunion, which is really sad. The last thing he said, let's go find Elizabeth. So it was just amazing. And he still remembered them, and he, just the quietness of his spirit. And that man traveled the world, and he never forgot, where are my sisters? Now, the sad part is Jerry, he died really young in 1973 from a violent act of another family member. And then Michael died of an accident, also very young. He was only 26. And so there he was, all pretty much by himself. And then Patsy, she lived in Denver. That's where she grew up with her uncle that actually was turned into her father, okay? And so she grew up in South Denver. I grew up in North Denver. And we kind of circled each other, not realizing it at all. So with that, I, 'cause Oh, it was probably 2019. My daughter, Robin, called me up and said, oh, everybody keeps asking me what nationality I am. And I said, I don't know. They think that I'm either Spanish or they think that I'm Italian or something. They didn't know. My adopted parents didn't know. The only thing that they told them is that there was a half brother that kept running away. Well, that was Jerry, but that's it. I knew nothing else. They knew nothing else. So you just always wonder, you're just like, wow, I wonder what's going on. Here's the interesting part. Teresa would write in her letters, oh Lord, someday, please, please bring my family back, someday. That was always her prayer, and she would have it written down in the letters. Well, when Debbie, Jana, and Susan saw the letter, it broke their heart to see the struggle of that woman and losing everything. And so my daughter called me up and said, oh, Mom, I got a gift from my husband, and that way I can find out who I am. And it was the on-site Ancestry.com. So she went on and she filled out the paperwork and did all this, and then off went their lives. And then here comes, COVID. And about 2 weeks after COVID starts, I get a phone call from my daughter. And she says, Mom, are you sitting down? And I said, yeah, why? And I thought it was strange because it was early in the morning, and my daughter usually doesn't call me early in the morning. And she said, I got this email, and I'm going to read it to you. And it says, I do not know how we are related. How is it that you're what they called first-tier relation? And can you explain? Because we're triplets looking for our sister Elizabeth that was in Denver, we think. Well, my daughter says, oh, that's got to be my mom. So she called me up and said, what do you want me to do? And I'm like crying, okay? Because I got to back up. I forgot to mention that when I was pregnant with my son, RJ, the doctor came to me and said, well, do you have any history, medical? I said, no, I don't know anything. I was adopted. I have no idea. They didn't give. Well, do you know they're starting to release paperwork? And I said, oh. He goes, right, to the Department of Welfare, and they will send you the information. Well, you better believe I jumped on that. Here comes the information, and here comes the shocker. Okay, I am half Spanish and half English Irish, and the biggest shock for me was I actually had brothers and sisters, and I had never heard of this. And then it said the triplets were born in '59, were adopted out in another state. Well, back then I'm like, oh, they got split up. There's no way, especially in the system, they're going to be able to keep 3 together. And that's one of the reasons that the foster mom got a hold of the judge who she used to go to high school with, who then knew of the lawyer who was looking to adopt a child. So they called him up and they invited him to come look at the triplets. Well, it was over. They wanted the triplets. But I didn't know they were kept together, nor did I know about them. So I kind of just went, oh, that's too bad. And I just, and then it's told the story about how my mother had a break and she was in and out of the state hospital in Pueblo, Colorado. That was basically all I had to go on, nothing else. There were no names, there were only years. That was it. So I just, and then it told me there was hypertension in the family or what, but very, very light, wasn't very specific. So I just folded up the paperwork and I just put it in my box and said, okay, whatever. So flash, here we come forward now. So then Orlando passed away, and the cousins, they kept going to the cousins. What year was she born? Well, we don't know. And we're pretty sure she was born in 57. What month? We don't know. We think she was born in the summer. And the journalist kept saying, if we just had a birth date, we could find her in a heartbeat. But we didn't have anything. They didn't have anything to go on. So they just put it back, and then Janice said, I'm going to still look and see what we can do. And that's when Ancestry.com came on. Then she started putting forth the information. And what caught her eye was they send the information back and said, this is a relative. And she said what caught her eye was, oh my gosh, there is a connection to Pennsylvania. No other would be Pennsylvania except a direct connection to them. And so that's why she reached out to Robin. So one day before their 60th birthday, I get this, and I'm so excited, and I'm crying. Then I go, after I read the Seattle Times, I go on and I start my own search, because now I've got some names. And lo and behold, on the internet is Calvary Chapel in Modesto had a program where the three triplets talked about their life and what had happened. Now, I had not been found yet. This was in November of 2019. And so I'm sitting there watching the video, and I'm crying because someone in the audience said, whatever happened to Elizabeth? And I'm like, I'm here. So I got the name, and I recognized the church, so I called the church. And because I kept asking my daughter, Annie, did you get a response? Did you get a response? No. So I'm so excited. I called the church, and I said, I'm looking for one of your parishioners. And she said, yeah. And I said, Susan Walker. She goes, oh, we don't have a Susan Walker. We have a Susan Walters. I go, oh, that's what I meant. Oh, that's what I meant. And she goes, well, oh, she moved. Oh. I said, oh, no. I said, do you happen to know maybe where she is? How can I find her? And she said, well, who are you? I said, wait, I'll tell you who I am. I'm Elizabeth. What? She said, yes, I'm Elizabeth. I am the sister that they've been looking for all this time. And she got so excited. She said, oh my goodness, let me have your number. I'm going to have somebody call you back. I'm going to have somebody call you back. And sure enough, Susan returned the call and said, oh, we've been looking for you. Thank God we have found you. And that night, all four of my sisters, we were on a conference call talking and just reliving everything about where were you, what was going on, kind of thing. Well, God being so faithful, I was very upset. I'm like, oh, of course this would happen now, right? But he knows. And through that, I had time to adjust to this new information and call them and talk to them slowly. Once a month, I would call and speak to all of them. And they would talk to me, and we would talk about just everything. Relatives, friends, what they knew, their lives, just catching up. 60-some years of catching up. But through that, I learned about them. I learned who they were. They weren't strangers. See, when the girls went to meet Orlando, it really was meeting a stranger. They got the phone call, they talked to him, and then they flew off to New Mexico to meet him. It wasn't like that for me. I actually got to talk to them and find out what their likes were, what they were into. It's sort of like a coworker. How you talk to a coworker on the phone and you get to know them, and then all of a sudden they show up for a meeting and you're like, hey, I know you. That's how it was for me. I waited, threw it out all the way till April of 2021. There I'm meeting Patsy, that's my daughter, And we're meeting Patsy first, because I had gone to Denver, and I saw my daughter, and then I called and I asked Patsy, would she like to meet? And she said yes. Now, she's my half-sister, and she lives in Littleton, and I cannot tell you how many times I drove by her house. Yes. So many times. So many times we were practically at the same mall. Yeah, isn't that crazy? And then there are my triplet sisters on their birthday, and they sent that to me. They really look a lot like the Valdez family, a lot. And there we are. We met in April of 2021. And so we put everything together. And it just has been, it's been a wonderful story. It's been an eye-opener. It's been a blessing because they are all quite involved with the Lord. In fact, we've been asked to appear at, I don't know if you know, Anchor Ministries. And it was started by a woman who had lost her child to cancer and wanted to connect with other mothers and women who have also suffered losses. And she asked us to appear to, and that'll happen spring of next year. So the thing was Teresa passed away before any of this happened. She passed away at very young. She was 64. She died of complications of breast cancer and heart disease. And so she never knew what had happened all the time either. But she never gave up. She never gave up asking God, someday, God will bring us all back together. And so through all this, I've been able to meet the last of my biological mother's family. He is still alive. He's 85 years old. He's the youngest brother of the 13. He is the only one left, and sharp. He used to work at the Pentagon, and he just, he can do his cell phone better than I can. He's great. So I got to meet him. The beautiful part about it is I got to meet my cousins, who a lot of them were 10, 12 years older than me. So they still remembered taking me out to the garden and playing with me and trying to tell me, no, that's not an apple, that's a tomato. And so, what they remembered was a blonde-haired little girl with green eyes. I was the only one, by the way, that had the blonde hair and the light eyes. Other than all my sisters have brown eyes. I'm the only one that has green, and Teresa had green. And they called it the Valdez green eyes. And it was just like, wow, right? Yeah. So it was a moment that I can't explain to you. Just a family that was interrupted, and then God said, come on, let's scoop us all together. And what I really, really took back from that is, while we didn't, reunite in her lifetime, it was the Lord, just like he did with the Israelites in the desert. God remained faithful. And that's what I take away. And I want you all to take that away too. Thank you so much for having me. If you have any questions or I'll be glad to talk to you about what I know a little bit more in depth. Bud never relocated, they never got back together. She was in the state hospital in and out. And he went off, he did serve, he did get caught by the FBI, he did serve prison time. He got out and he retired from John Deere as a machinist, and he ended up living in Oklahoma City. And he never remarried, nothing, so, yes.
Did he ever meet the girls?
No, of course, after they were born and we were all together, yes. But no. Here's the fascinating thing that our sisters we talked, and not so much with Patsy, because she went with the Garduno family, but for our Knisely, he did not sign off on us until we were signed off altogether, which is very interesting. They were, even though they had been moved into the family, they were not legally adopted till they were 4 and I was 5, and he signed off on all of us at the same time. Yeah, so very interesting. But they did track him down, they did find him. And you know, the funny part is I was still old enough to have memories. And I do remember coming down on a plane and somebody holding my hands. And Orlando told me, yes, they flew the Gardunos and myself out on a plane. And they flew us to Colorado, and then on to New Mexico they went, because that's where the Garduno family was, half of them. And except for Patsy, they were in Denver. And I basically did get lost in the system. It just, yeah. They tried, the Valdez family, Teresa's brothers and sisters did try to get me. But they all had so many kids. They all had like 6, 7 kids. And the department said, no, you guys can't have her. Then another brother tried, and a sister, no. So then I just stayed there. And that was pretty much it. And really wasn't any, I really didn't know anything. And you just always wonder, wow, I guess she really didn't want me. You know, you always have this thing in your mind, but it wasn't that at all. She never gave up hope. She never, ever. She would talk, and just before she passed away, her thing was, I wish I could see them, but I'll know I'll see them in heaven someday, which was beautiful, absolutely beautiful, that she felt that way. And so I did get to go up and see where she was buried with her family. They're the only family that her father was a state legislator, and they owned an awful lot of homestead in New Mexico. And they gave a lot back to the Indians, and because they did that, the Indians granted them their own cemetery, own family cemetery. So here's all this family that's buried there. And she's buried next to her brothers, and her parents are buried there. It was really lots of beautiful history that went with that. So I just, it was just, I did get to meet, when my last time, that's why I haven't been here for the last couple Sundays, I did go to meet Orlando's wife, who is still alive, and his beautiful children, and they would talk to me and tell me, my dad never forgot about you. And the sad part for Orlando is that he had memories of all of us, and he had a horrible memory of me when they took me away from him. I was reaching out and crying, and he, being a 13-year-old, was holding his ears, and he couldn't. He'd go, don't worry, we'll see you when the plane lands. He never saw me again. And so he would sit there and say, oh, Sally, his wife, come here, quick. She would come there, and he would say, oh, see that girl on TV? And Sally would say, yes, that's Elizabeth. I'll bet you she looks like that. So he never, ever forgot. And he would have dreams. Yeah, he would have dreams. And so when I went there at this time, they told me beautiful stories about him, the great sense of humor he had, and just the heart that man had, always not wanting to give up. So he was so happy. He said, now I can die because I've met my sisters. And he did. 5 months later, he passed away. But it was just beautiful, because he told me, he said, now we go find Elizabeth. And so, so like I said, it was beautiful because I got to meet my cousin. She's about 11, and she had great stories of me, and she'd have great stories of the triplets. They were like little dolls. All the cousins loved them because they were like little dolls, and everybody could have one. So that was kind of neat. Yeah, that was great. And of course, it was beautiful. Uncle Octavia, he's got tears in his eyes and said, "Oh, you look like your mother," and he was just really, really sweet. It was just amazing to talk to him. And of course, he had even more history because he was there. He kind of knew what was going on. She never remarried. She never had any other children. In fact, a gentleman did ask her to get married, but she said, "No, I couldn't have my own children. I'm not going to do this for somebody else. I want my children." So, yeah, so it was something else, you know. And Patsy still remembers, at least she still remembers Jerry, and she still remembers Michael, but not for very long, you know. Then he passed away, and Patsy was just basically left by herself, you know. There wasn't really anybody. She didn't really know about us either. It was all the Gardunos, so that was the interesting part for her. She would have like flash of memories, but not, she would remember playing with the dolls, which were, she remembered that Orlando would put them on the table and they would start changing the diapers, and she still remembers that. She said they were like little dolls. I thought they were dolls. So that was, and she was 5 when everything broke apart. Yeah. So her, Seraphine was the father of the first 4, and it was his brother that took in children from his brothers and sisters that couldn't handle. He actually would step up and he'd say, I'll take him. So all his family, 3 of them were all related, were all blood related. They were all first cousins, and then the last one was adopted through Catholic Charities, and she was not blood related, but all the other ones were. So just like I said, an amazingly beautiful story, and we get on the phone and we'll talk about what the Lord's done for us and how amazing He is, and just beautiful, just beautiful. So, and I think the real interesting thing about it is that here we are, and we're all raised in different environment, but yet we have a lot of mannerisms that are the same. Yeah, we have, like one of us, we have the same type of laugh, or we'll have the same type of smile. Just the way we carry ourselves is like, wow, right? Yeah. And when I started laughing, when the triplets first heard me, they said, "Oh my Lord, you sound exactly like Orlando. He had that vibrant laugh." And I was just, wow, that's awesome. So it was just a beautiful history that I got on both sides. I did get in touch with the Knisely family. Bud's nephew contacted me, and he actually knew a little bit more about the family and talked to me about everything. And so that was really neat. That was nice. Now here's the shocker. My first cousin I met in Pueblo this last time, just here recently, and he said, "Do you know how many first cousins you have?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, let's see. You had 65, but you know, life goes on and we start getting old. Now you've got 58. 58 first cousins." I'm like, oh, yeah. So they're all trying to get everybody together to meet, have all the sisters together, and we can all meet the cousins. So that's what we're working on now. Yeah, so that's the interesting story about it. And that's why I'm so honored to tell you about our journey, so that you don't lose faith, whatever you're personally going through in your life, to know God is always faithful. And He does what He does in His time, which is the best time, honestly. Because we were all talking, the triplets and I, and Patsy, we said, oh gosh, we had our own families back then. Were we mature enough to be able to handle something like this too? Our kids were, you know, that's when we were all discussing where we were at. And Jana said, I think I would have wanted to run. She said, I'm sorry, but it's like opening up a can of worms. You don't know what you're going to get. And I totally understand that, because that's how youth, oh my gosh, who are these people? They have totally different backgrounds and different experiences. But yet, we're together, and the funniest part was, even Joe said this, we meet my cousins and my uncle and my brother's wife and his children. Do you know what it felt like? It felt like a reunion, not the first time that we were meeting, because Orlando had kept it alive so much and talking about me so much that it felt like a reunion. It was the strangest thing, actually. And I had not really talked to them. And so meeting them the very first time was really like, this is strange. Even Joe said, this was strange. And I said, no, this is God. This is God. This is God. And so I can't tell you how thankful, and we just, it's God's glory. That's all I can tell you. And that's why I'm so honored to have been able to tell you the story of them. Thank you. And here's the neat part, is they are trying to get up here, or would it be up? It'd be down from them. They're in Washington State. So to be able to come in, and I said, oh, we've got to go to my church. And they're all, yes, they're so excited, yes. And then maybe they all can also speak too. That would be really wonderful. So they're looking forward to coming. So that's it. And so I'm just, life is short, so we're trying to make the best of, we're all getting older now, and we're all trying to squeeze in as much as we can. But it was beautiful because I got to meet their husbands this time. When we met in April, I just basically met the triplets. There weren't any children, there weren't any husbands or anything. We did that on purpose, just to have our time together. And then this time I got to meet their husbands, and I got to meet a couple of their children, and some of them couldn't come, so they did FaceTime. So that was still really a beautiful gift. Yeah. So you're the aunt. Oh, and here's the other fascinating thing, is that I look like one of my first cousins. Carlotta is Teresa's sister, and she had a girl named Lorraine. And everyone who sees me, all the rest, oh my gosh, Lorraine and you could be twins. And I didn't believe it until I saw a picture, and I was like, oh my gosh, we could be twins. Yeah, we look so much alike. It was kind of like, wow. So the first, probably 6 months, my phone was ringing off the hook. Hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm so-and-so's brother. It was pretty neat. I'm Minnie's son, and that was another. All these people calling me, and it was just, wow. And then Jolene, who is the one who started all this, who found the box, she said, I still remember you. And I said, really? Wow. She said, yes, because you and the triplets were together. And she said, so we remember a little blonde-haired girl running around. And she said, and you were walking, and you could talk. So I'm like, wow. So that places me about, they're thinking I was 2, maybe just a couple months older than 2, when it just dissipated. And she just really didn't know what had happened to her. So that's why. And times were different then too. So yeah, that's it. But thank you again.
Thank you.